Okay, what I have here is an absolute value function. So the absolute value function, in this case, this y-intercept is going to be 1 because if I plugged in a 0, the absolute value of 0 is 0 plus 1 is 1. So that's going to give me my y-intercept point. The last number is not always the y-intercept in the absolute value, but it is in this case. On the next one, if I plug in a 1, absolute value of 1 is 1 plus 1 is 2. Next one, plug in a 2. Absolute value of 2 is 2 plus 1 is 3. Now the truth is, if I were to plug in a negative 2, the absolute value of negative 2 is still equal to 2, and then 2 plus 1 would still be equal to 3. So I have something that looks symmetrical like the quadratic, but an absolute value actually makes a V-shaped graph. I like to think an absolute value always makes a V shape. So absolute value, you can always expect a V-shaped graph. Now, domain again. Notice the x values keep getting positive. They keep getting negative, so my domain is all real numbers. You might think the domain is always all real numbers. It's not, but it is a lot of the times. And then your range is going to be your y value. So the smallest y value I have here is 1. Always start with the smallest value. The largest y value I have here is infinity, so it goes from 0 to infinity, and that gives you some ideas there. Now I'm going to kind of take care of two things real quick. First, I'm going to show you how to get to desmos. So the way to get to desmos is I can go for NC testing calculator. If you Google NC testing calculator, the very first thing that comes up is the testing version of Desmos. You might have an app for Desmos, but if you're using this with a Chromebook or computer, I want you to get used to using the testing version because this is the version that matches what is on your exam. So now I'm just going to type in another equation so we can look at two different examples for domain and range. If I have something like this, you notice in this case, Desmos does give you these gray dots. It gives me gray dots at -2 and +2. Those are x-intercepts, which are important. But if I'm thinking domain and range, the maximum or minimum is the important value. So in this case, I have this maximum value at 0, 4. So my domain in this case is all real numbers because my x values keep getting bigger. They can be any positive number. They keep getting smaller. Some students like to stop the domain at -2, but it does not stop at -2. It keeps going there and even beyond. Once you kept going down off the screen and get to -4, eventually -6. It keeps going on as big as it wants, so that's why it's all real numbers. The range, we're looking for the lowest y value and the highest y value. Well, the lowest y value is it's going way off the screen, so it's going down, down, down. And since it's going down in the negative direction, I call that negative infinity. And then the highest value is 4. Notice that I always have to start with my lowest value, which for the range is the bottom, and I stop with the highest value, which for the range is the top. So negative infinity to 4. And the reason I'm using a bracket there is because it actually touches the point 4. So that's why that gets a bracket. You can never actually get to infinity. Sorry, Buzz Lightyear, but you can't really get to infinity and beyond. And you've got to do a parenthesis there for your negative infinity. One other thing I promised you is something where the domain was not all real numbers. So I'll show you one of those real quick. You don't need to worry about why this equation is what it is. This is a little beyond where y'all need to be right now. But you can have something like this. On this one, your domain, your x value, your smallest x value would be -2. You see the graph kind of stops over here at -2. And the biggest x value would be +2. So notice the domain doesn't really tell you a lot about the shape of the graph. It just tells you the location of the graph. You can have graphs with the same domain with very different shapes. The range in this case looks like it's a -1 for the small value, and the big value is a 3. So always list the small value first, the big value second, and that's how you do interval notation. And that's some good examples of domain and range, and you even saw how to use Desmos. If you got additional questions, please reach out to me. I'd be happy to answer them via email or Zoom.